There was a man named Tariq who lived in a small coastal town where the ocean waves crashed against ancient rocks, and the call to prayer echoed 5 times a day through narrow streets lined with whitewashed buildings. He was 42 years old, owned a modest fishing boat that had belonged to his father and grandfather before him, and carried a burden in his heart so heavy that some mornings he wondered how he found the strength to get out of bed. Tariq's burden was the distance between himself and his only son, Yusuf, who was now 23 years old. The distance wasn't measured in miles, though Yusuf had moved to a city 3 hours away for university and then stayed there for work. The real distance was measured in years of silence, in words left unspoken, in a relationship that had broken so completely that neither father nor son knew how to begin repairing it. The rupture had happened 5 years ago during Yusuf's final year of high school. Tariq had been a strict father, raised in the old way where discipline meant harsh words and sometimes harsher punishments. He had believed he was teaching his son to be strong, to be a man, to survive in a difficult world. But what he had actually taught Yusuf was that his father's love was conditional, that approval had to be earned through perfect obedience, that mistakes were met with anger rather than understanding. The final break came when Yusuf told his father he wanted to study literature at university instead of becoming a fisherman or pursuing a practical degree like engineering or medicine. Tariq had exploded in rage, calling his son foolish, saying he was wasting his life on useless dreams, declaring that if Yusuf chose that path he would do so without his father's blessing or support. Yusuf had left anyway, working multiple jobs to pay his own way through university, sending only brief formal messages home to let his mother know he was alive. He never called his father, he never visited. And Tariq, trapped in his own pride and stubbornness, never reached out to apologize, never admitted he had been wrong, never told his son the truth that he missed him desperately, that he was proud of him, that the distance between them was killing him slowly. 5 years had passed this way. Tariq's wife Fatima tried repeatedly to bridge the gap between father and son, but both men were too wounded and too proud. She would tell Tariq to call Yusuf, to apologize, to make things right. She would tell Yusuf that his father loved him even if he couldn't express it properly. But neither would bend. Every night after his wife had fallen asleep, Tariq would sit alone on the small balcony of their home, looking out at the dark ocean, and cry silent tears for the son he had lost to his own anger and pride. He would remember Yusuf as a small boy, running to greet him when he returned from fishing, eyes bright with unconditional love. He would remember teaching him to tie knots, to read the weather in the clouds, to say his prayers. He would remember the exact moment when that love in his son's eyes had turned to fear, then to resentment, then to nothing at all. "I can't take this distance anymore," Tariq would whisper to the darkness. "Please God, I can't carry this weight, I'm drowning in it." But he still didn't call. Pride is a powerful prison. It was late autumn when Tariq began having a recurring dream. In the dream, he was drowning in the ocean, struggling against waves that pulled him under. From the shore, he could see Yusuf standing on the beach, watching him struggle. Tariq would try to call out, to ask for help, but no sound would come from his mouth. And Yusuf would stand there, frozen tears streaming down his face, wanting to help but unable to move. Each time Tariq would wake up gasping, his heart pounding, the image of his son's anguished face burning in his mind. The dream came night after night, always the same, until Tariq began to dread falling asleep. One Friday morning, exhausted from another sleepless night, Tariq dragged himself to the mosque for the dawn prayer. He prayed mechanically, his mind foggy with fatigue, barely aware of the words he was reciting. After the prayer, as others were leaving, the old imam who had known Tariq since childhood approached him with concern. "Brother Tariq, you look like a man carrying the weight of the world. Would you like to talk? Tariq almost refused, as he always did when anyone tried to reach past his defenses. But something in the Imam's kind eyes, combined with his exhaustion and the recurring nightmare, broke through his resistance. He found himself nodding. They sat in a quiet corner of the mosque as early morning light filtered through the windows, and Tariq told the Imam everything about Yusuf, about the distance, about the pride that kept him from reaching out, about the dreams that haunted him. The Imam listened without interrupting, his old eyes reflecting deep understanding. When Tariq finished, the Imam was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Do you know the story of the Prophet Yusuf, peace be upon him, and his father Yaqub?" the Imam asked. Tariq nodded uncertainly. Yaqub was separated from his beloved son for many years. The pain of that separation was so great that he cried until he lost his sight. But Yaqub never lost hope in God's mercy, never stopped praying for his son's return. And what happened in the end? They were reunited, Tariq said quietly. Yes, but not through Yaqub's own efforts. It was God who orchestrated the miracle of their reunion. Yaqub's part was to maintain hope, to continue praying, to keep his heart open to God's plan, even when it seemed impossible. The Imam leaned forward. "Brother Tariq, I see in your eyes that you cannot take this distance anymore. Good. That desperation, that breaking point is exactly where miracles begin. When we reach the end of our own strength, when we can no longer carry the burden alone, that's when we finally let God carry it for us." "But what should I do?" Tariq asked, his voice breaking. "I've been too proud, too harsh. I don't even know if my son would speak to me if I called." "You do what Yaqub did," the Imam said gently. "You turn to God completely. You pray not just with your tongue but with your whole broken heart. You ask God to heal what you cannot heal, to bridge what you cannot bridge, to perform the miracle that only He can perform. And then you do the one thing your pride has prevented you. Humble yourself and reach out to your son regardless of the outcome." That night, after the Isha prayer, Tariq stood alone on his prayer mat and raised his hands in supplication. No longer the proud, self-sufficient man who had always tried to control everything, but a broken father desperate for mercy. "God," he cried, tears streaming down his face, "I have been foolish and arrogant. I have hurt my son with my harsh words and my stubborn pride. I have created a distance between us that I don't know how to cross. I cannot take this weight anymore. I'm begging you, please perform a miracle. Please bring my son back to me. Please heal this broken relationship. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking for your mercy, not my merit." He cried and prayed until he had no strength left, until he collapsed in prostration on the floor, completely surrendered to God's will. The next morning, Saturday, Tariq did something he had been too proud to do for 5 years. He took out his phone, stared at his son's contact information for a long time, and with trembling hands he called. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Tariq was about to hang up, his courage failing, when he heard a voice. "Hello?" It was Yusuf, sounding uncertain, probably surprised to see his father's name on the screen. Tariq's throat closed up. He couldn't speak. "Hello, Baba?" Yusuf's voice was tentative, using the word father for the first time in years. "Yusuf," Tariq managed to choke out. "My son, I need to tell you something." There was silence on the other end, but Yusuf didn't hang up. He was listening. "I was wrong," Tariq said, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "I was wrong about everything. Wrong to be so harsh with you, wrong to make my love conditional, wrong to put my pride above our relationship, wrong to let 5 years pass without telling you that I miss you every single day, that I'm proud of you, that I love you more than I know how to express." He heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end, but still Yusuf didn't speak. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Tariq continued, crying openly now. "I don't deserve it, but I had to tell you, I can't carry this distance anymore. It's killing me. Whatever you decide to do with this information, I just needed you to know that your father loves you and is sorry." There was a long silence. Then Tariq heard it, the sound of his son crying. "Baba." Yusuf's voice was thick with emotion. "I've been waiting 5 years to hear you say that. 5 years of being angry, of being hurt, but also of missing you so much I couldn't breathe sometimes. I wanted to call you 1,000 times. I wanted to come home. But I was afraid you would reject me again, and I didn't think I could survive that." "Come home," Tariq said urgently. "Please, son. Now come, let me show you that I've changed, that I'm trying to be the father you deserved all along." "I can't right now," Yusuf said. "I have work commitments this week. But next Friday I'll come. I'll take the day off and drive down next Friday." They talked for another hour, carefully at first, then with growing ease, bridging the gap of 5 years with words they should have spoken long ago. When they finally hung up, Tariq fell to his knees in gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered to God. "Thank you for this miracle." But the miracle was only beginning. That same week, 300 kilometers away in the city where Yusuf lived and worked as a teacher at a private school, something else was happening. Yusuf had his own relationship that had been strained by distance, not with another person, but with God. During his years of anger toward his father, Yusuf had also become angry at God. Why had God given him such a difficult father? Why had God allowed so much pain in their relationship? Why hadn't God answered his childhood prayers for his father to be kinder, more understanding? This anger had manifested as distance. Yusuf still prayed, but mechanically, without feeling. He still fasted, but without the spiritual connection he had once felt. He went through the motions of faith while his heart remained closed, unwilling to be vulnerable again, even with his Creator. The phone call with his father had cracked something open in Yusuf's heart. As he hung up, he realized that his father's pride and stubbornness had been like a mirror showing him his own relationship with God. Just as his father had been too proud to reach out and apologize, Yusuf had been too proud to open his heart to God again, too afraid of being hurt or disappointed. That night, Yusuf did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed Tahajjud, a voluntary night prayer. He woke in the darkest part of the night, performed ablution, and stood alone before God. "God," he prayed, "I've been so angry. Angry at my father, but also angry at you. I felt abandoned by both of you. But I see now that my father was reaching out even when I couldn't see it, suffering the distance as much as I was. Maybe you've been doing the same, reaching out to me in ways I was too blind to notice because I was so wrapped up in my pain." He continued, "I can't take this distance from you anymore either. I've been spiritually dead for years, going through the motions, protecting my heart. But tonight, I want to be alive again. I want to feel your presence the way I did when I was a child. Please heal me too. Please perform this miracle, not just bringing me closer to my father, but bringing me closer to you." In that moment of complete vulnerability and honesty, Yusuf felt something shift. It was subtle at first, like the first crack in ice that's been frozen for a long winter. But it was real. The week passed slowly for both father and son, each counting down the days until Friday. Tariq cleaned the house obsessively, prepared his son's favorite foods, and prayed constantly that the reunion would go well. Yusuf finished his work responsibilities, told his colleagues he was going to see his father for the first time in years, and felt both excitement and terror in equal measure. Friday morning arrived. Yusuf made the 3-hour drive to the coastal town where he had grown up. As he navigated the familiar roads, memories flooded back, both painful and beautiful. He remembered his father's harsh words, but also remembered being taught to fish, to sail, to navigate by stars. He remembered disappointment and anger, but also love that had been there even if it was expressed imperfectly. When Yusuf's car pulled up in front of the small house near the harbor, Tariq was waiting outside, unable to stay indoors a moment longer. For a long moment, father and son stood looking at each other across the distance of the driveway, a distance that represented 5 years of pain, pride, and separation. Then Tariq did something he had never done in Yusuf's entire adult life. He opened his arms and said, "My son, I love you." Yusuf ran to him and they embraced for the first time in years, both crying openly, both whispering apologies and forgiveness, both feeling the miracle of walls crumbling and distance dissolving. Fatima watched from the doorway, her own tears of gratitude flowing freely. She had prayed for this moment every single day for 5 years, had never lost hope, even when it seemed impossible. That evening, the family sat together at dinner, talking and laughing with an ease that felt both familiar and new. But what made the reunion truly miraculous wasn't just the healing between father and son, it was what happened after the meal. Tariq stood up from the table and said, "Son, would you lead us in prayer tonight? I know you were always better at reciting than I was." Yusuf looked at his father in surprise, then nodded. They performed ablution together, and as they stood side by side for the Maghrib prayer, both felt the presence of a third relationship being healed, their relationships with God. As Yusuf recited the Quran during the prayer, his voice breaking with emotion, he felt the ice around his heart finally melting completely. He realized that God had been orchestrating this miracle all along, waiting patiently for both father and son to reach the breaking point where pride would shatter and healing could begin. After the prayer, they sat together on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the same balcony where Tariq had spent countless nights crying for his son. Tariq told Yusuf about the recurring dream, about the Imam's wisdom, about the desperate prayer that had finally broken through his pride. "I couldn't take the distance anymore," Tariq said. "I was drowning in it, just like in the dream. But the miracle wasn't just that we're sitting here together now. The miracle is that God used my desperation to teach me something about His mercy. He never gave up on me, even when I was too proud and stubborn to ask for help. He waited until I was ready to surrender, and then He performed the impossible." Yusuf nodded, understanding completely. "I couldn't take the distance either, not just from you but from God. I've been angry and closed off for so long. But seeing your courage in calling me, seeing how God answered your prayers, it opened my heart again." They talked late into the night, healing years of wounds with honest conversation, forgiveness, and shared tears. And as they talked, they both understood that the real person who couldn't take the distance anymore wasn't just Tariq or Yusuf. It was God Himself who had created them for connection with Him and with each other, who suffered their suffering and yearned for their healing even more than they did. From that day forward, Yusuf came home every Friday. Father and son rebuilt their relationship on a new foundation, not of harsh discipline and conditional approval, but of mutual respect, honest communication, and unconditional love. And both of them rebuilt their relationships with God, understanding that every human relationship is meant to reflect and strengthen our relationship with the divine. Years later, when Yusuf married and had children of his own, he would tell them the story of the miracle that happened when his father finally admitted he couldn't take the distance anymore. He would teach them that pride is the greatest obstacle to love, that God's mercy is always greater than our mistakes, and that miracles happen when we finally surrender our stubborn will to the one who has been patiently waiting for us all along. This is the truth that transforms lives. There is someone who cannot take the distance from you anymore. God Himself, who created you for connection with Him, who suffers when you suffer, who yearns for your return when you stray. He has been waiting patiently, sending signs and blessings, orchestrating circumstances to wake you up, hoping you'll finally close the distance you've created through pride, neglect, or anger. And when you finally reach that breaking point where you admit you cannot carry the burden alone anymore, that's exactly when the miracle begins. Not because you've earned it or deserve it, but because God's mercy has been there all along, waiting for you to finally let Him close the distance and perform the impossible in your life.